Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I have special guest today, Chris from CNM Housing Solutions. He's been on the show a couple of times before, and today he's on the telephone. And can you hear me, Chris?
I hear you,
As far as I know, you're operating a motor vehicle as you speak.
yeah. I am
Yes,
hands free.
yes. We like full attention, So pull over.
When I say hands free, I mean the phone, not the steering wheel.
Well, I hope your voice is getting picked up on this contraption here. So, but what I really wanted to have you on was to talk about, because you're a real estate person. That's what you do for a living. You used to do when the rates were much lower. You used to do a lot of house flipping, and the previous administration put sort of kind of the kibosh on that. Maybe you'll get into that for a little bit, and tell us what you think about the new regime and how you think it'll affect the real estate market in general. I know the Fed rate right now is at 4.33. That's the Fed rate. So, what? Well, tell us a little bit how you feel in general about the current real estate market.
Well, right now we're feeling pretty good actually of late. And just to rewind a little bit from what you were saying before, there was a good probably 3 or 4 year span where we did a good number of flips, and it was one flip in, one flip out, and it was pretty mechanical. And then what we noticed is late 2022, and we were coming out off of like a rocking market. And late 2022, our days on market for their finished flips that were listed started to rise. So to compare, we'd be in just your average cosmetic flip, paint, floors, kitchen, bath, nothing too crazy. We're not doing the roofs or anything like that. Just your basic flip. We can be in and out in a couple of months and put it on the market.
Right.
Close to close, we've been at probably an average of 4 to 5 months, and that's counting on what at the time we were used to. Maybe if your flip was on the market for 2 weeks, it meant something was wrong. When we noticed that creeping up above a month, and a lot of our flips at the time, I think we had 4 late 2022. I want to say it was right at that crest of the holidays where 2022 went to 2023. They started sitting for 30. One of them was on for 40 days. So we hit the brakes a little bit. And then, for the next couple of months, the big scare was interest rates. The interest rates are climbing. They're climbing. And what it started to do is take a lot of our buyers out of the market, because we had people that were selling their homes, looking for maybe a second home, or even your first home in most cases. But where it took a lot of buyers out of the market was the person that had an interest rate on their current property for 3 or 4%, and now they were selling their house, and all they could find is interest rates in some places 7 or 8%. So they were going to wait that out, and we saw that from a business angle, because a lot of our buyer pool pulled out of the market.
I see. And your buyer pool was, as you just described, people looking to get a second home, or was it people that were looking to do an investment?
We have two primary markets that we work in locally in Pennsylvania. One of them is the price points are more suited for your first-time home buyer. The one closest to us that we did probably more flips than the other was really the second-time home buyer price point. So we had a lot of people upgrading their houses, and in that county specific, it almost shut off. It seemed like overnight, but it was probably a 3 or 4 month span.
Yeah, so that was that dried up almost immediately when the rates started climbing up.
It did, yeah. And we had to get creative with a few of ours that we kind of get. There's always a risk in anything you do, but especially real estate. If you get into a project like that, you have to be confident you're going to sell it on the backside. And when some of these got stuck, there's interest payments to be had. We got to keep the lights on. You're running a house. You're just waiting for a buyer. And when that market dries up, you still have to put money in the bank to cover those expenses. So we ended up turning one, maybe two of ours, but at least one of our flips into an Airbnb temporarily until we could sell it. So there was a lot of creative stuff like that happening just to stay afloat.
Right. And how did that work out? Was that profitable, or it was just keeping the door open, so to speak?
Keeping the door open. There wasn't really a market that is touristy, but we learned a lot through it because when you think Airbnb, you think vacation, going to places where a lot of people are going to travel and see different things. This wasn't one of those areas. What surprised us was we just wanted to maybe have even just a 40% occupancy for the month. Or let's call it 50%. If we could book 15 days out of the month, we were going to be able to at least pay for the house and an interest payment to a lender that was on the property. So what surprised us is we had almost full occupancy in a place that's not really known for tourists. And when you think about Airbnb, is the people that are traveling for 1 or 2 days for life. People were coming in for funerals and staying for 2 days.
Wow.
People were coming in for weddings and staying for 2 days, and it fills up the calendar. So we actually lucked out when it came to that, but not something we would have thought of.
How did you scheme out the pricing for such a thing? Like, did you have to undercut the hotels, or how does that work?
There's certain sites where it gives like an average of your area, and if that was doable for us, that's what we put our pricing at. Airbnb has a system, like an algorithm built into where it has competitive pricing. So if 5 houses are in your area and they're renting at a pretty competitive rate and they're filling up consistently, it'll price your house accordingly based on what they're having successful bookings. So we just used the competitive rates and saw how that worked out for us. And it would fluctuate here and there, but it was enough to cover the bills. We weren't really looking to make a profit from it, just to keep afloat until we could sell the house.
Well, what was the when you were in the height of the flipping market? What was the Fed rate then, give or take?
Honestly, I can't remember.
Yeah, it was
but I know the average interest rates in our area. People were getting mortgages for under 4. I mean, they're 3%, and in some cases, you have your special mortgages for the VA loans and things like that were 1 to 1.5%. So the buyer pool was phenomenal back then. Because coming off the last cycle, then you had it the other way. You had people stuck in 6 and 7% mortgages that were now buying 3% mortgages. So a lot of bidding up, a lot of bidding wars on our flips. So we enjoyed that for the couple of years, but it really turns like that.
Right. And then when it started to creep up, that's when your flipping side of your market started to dry up.
Right. It dried up quickly, and then we pivoted to a little more wholesaling.
Yeah, explain to me. You've told me this, before we started recording. What is the difference between wholesaling and flipping?
So wholesaling is really, and if you see any of these HGTV shows, like one of the ones that was popular back then was the Flip or Flop, right? It was I forget their names, the ones from California. And they would buy properties from the MLS sometimes, calling realtors and making offers on properties. Every once in a while, you'd see this tagline come up down below that said that he bought it from a wholesaler. What the wholesaler is doing is negotiating a price with the seller of the property that they'd be willing to sell the property at. And if it's, let's say it's $100,000 to make the math easy. I get the property under contract for $100,000. We can either close on that property and do the flip, or if somebody else came along and said, I'd pay $110 for that, we can go ahead and it comes with a different agreement. It comes with a different contract. We can assign that contract to the next investor for that $10,000 spread. Close at the table with all 3 parties, and then we get the spread of $10,000. The seller gets their $100,000, and the other investor gets the property to do.
So the investor was willing at the time. This is a wholesale scheme you're talking about, right? A wholesaling scenario?
Yes.
So the investor at the time was willing to pay that excess for the property, the $10,000, say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we still do that today. I mean, wholesaling is pretty profitable. You're not going to make as much as a flip because you're building in a spread, but you still have to leave a spread for your end investor. And why we pivoted to that is because when the market dried up and houses weren't selling so much, there's always a market for real estate somewhere. So when your buying dries up, your renting spikes. So landlords started to buy properties. And the high interest rates, as long as there's a cash flow involved in the property, don't really affect the landlord as long as there's cash flow. You could have a 38% interest rate on your house, but if they're cash flowing what they want at $600 clear per month, they're going to buy the property because eventually the interest rates are going to come down. They can refinance. So there's always a market to sell to somebody.
Right. And I think in general, at least over the last, I don't know, 2-3 years, the banks themselves, big, medium, and small banks, seemed a little hesitant to lend out money on real estate, correct?
It seemed that way. Definitely on mortgages, they tightened up. I know your credit score needed to be higher. They were a little more picky about who they gave mortgages to. That seems to be loosening up now, which is nice. And honestly, I think the market loosened up a little bit last year with the expectancy of this being a good year because the interest rates weren't going up. People were a little more comfortable moving at that point, which is interesting to me because the same people that put it on hold were then selling and buying other houses at 5 or 6%. With still the 3 or 4% in place. So pricing could have something to do with that. Maybe prices came down in some areas. We haven't experienced that here, but I could see that being a result of the market loosening back up again.
Yep. When you say the market, you mean the banks loosening up their willingness to lend?
I would say both. Either the bank's willingness to lend and or people getting into the market, putting their houses back up for sale, willing to buy something else. So that goes hand in hand. They have to get qualified in most cases first.
Right. So with the Fed rate down now to 4.33, what do you anticipate in the short term? We'll get to the long term in a minute, but what do you anticipate in the short term?
Short term, I think this is going to be a good spring market, similar to what we saw 3 or 4 years ago. We're already seeing when they say, I'm sure you've seen it on the news before, they talk about the real estate market, they say the inventory is low.
Yeah.
When they talk about inventory, it's the number of houses that are active on the market consistently, and they track that over months or quarters or years. It's the number of houses that are active on the market at any given time. And what we're used to here in our local is when it's a really good, maybe not a super hot market, but a good, consistent market, we would have 3 to 4 months of inventory, meaning you could sell a house a day for 3 months. And you're always going to find active properties on the market. We would pick our school district or counties surrounding us a couple of years ago to look for active properties, and you'd find 800 to 1,000.
Right.
There were times last year and the year before where you would pull up those same counties and see 11 properties on the market.
Wow.
Like it was, when they say dry up, it's dried up.
Right.
Now in the recent 4 or 5 months, that's climbing. I can go on now and see a couple of hundred. We're probably at like 300 active properties on the market. So we're climbing, and those are the trends that we pay attention to figure out whether we want to start buying again.
Right.
Like at volume.
I see 3 words that used to be in the news a lot and hardly is in the last 3 years. New home sales always figured into the mix. They always reported on the level of new home sales, new homes. And you haven't heard that in 3 years.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of home building going on, or what does that mean?
There was a ton of new homes being built 3 years ago back, probably 3 years to maybe even 10 years back. And when they dry up first, it's because they're in the same business as we are, but they're into it for so much more. So a new build on a house, you're looking for a pretty decent return on a new build, but you have so much invested into that property the holding costs on that could be astronomical, especially if you're doing more than one. So if a builder gets into, let's say, a new development, and they're putting 100 houses in this development, and they're just starting out, they have to build the house and either sell the lot before building the house, or build the house and then sell the whole property as if it was, as if it was a regular house on the market.
Right.
If they sell the lot first, there's two ways that they do this here locally anyway. There's two ways. They can sell the lot off to an end buyer. So if you were in the market for a house, I was the builder, I say, I have this 1 acre lot of land. I can sell you the lot. You become the owner of it, and then you could take financing yourself on a construction loan and fund my project, and I'll build your house. I build in a profit for myself as a builder, and that's one way that some of these custom builders stayed in business throughout this slow time. The other way, which is more of your volumized building, is you get in there and they buy all this wood, they buy all this paint, they buy everything they need for a house, and they build 10 or 20 at a time. They have to count on selling those on the backside of that project. So if you're held with 20 houses and the market just stops overnight, you could kill a company really fast that way.
Yeah.
So this is why your new builders are really cautious, and they're usually the ones that stop first. So they're an indicator.
So you think there was 3 or more years ago, you mentioned more than 3 years ago, there was a glut in the new housing market?
Yeah, and I can speak to Southeast Pennsylvania. I know there's 4 big builders that we at least collaborate with, and they put up, I don't know, within a 20-mile radius. I know 4 or 5 developments went up with at least 100 houses per.
Wow.
So they were building left and right, and they stopped early last year here. Some of the developments are unfinished, and I know they're going to wait this out, probably be a little more cautious, and we are getting back into the market.
I understand. So you're going to try, I guess your end game is to stay ahead of that curve, right? Before the bigger boys get back in.
Yeah, and that's something that we've learned. We're in the business now, 8.5 years, so we really didn't experience the last crash, if you will. A lot of people took some big hits in 2008 to 2010.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
We got into the market in 2000. Well, we creeped into the market in 2015, but I'd say we really started around 2016, 17. Mm-hmm. So we were on the rise, and we enjoyed that for a good 4 or 5 years. So This was our first real dip that we experienced, and it's a learning curve, and you learn to pick up on those indicators a little quicker next time, which is probably the reason we were stuck with 3 or 4 properties, because some of the people we know that have been in the business for a while hit the brakes a little sooner than we did, and because they knew better.
So this is your first adverse economic trend that you dealt with.
It is.
I guess, and it's a good tool to have in your belt, to try and nobody can predict the future, but you got to, in your business, you really have to try and look further on up the road, right?
Yeah, and probably the biggest thing we took away from it is 2 parts. One is we know what to look for in the future. As this comes up again, we're gonna notice that a little sooner. But probably more importantly, one of the lessons we took away from it is and I think this goes for everything, when something's going really well, the fog is thick, meaning it's hard to see when things are turning bad. But when things are already bad, it's really, really easy to see when they're turning good. So we don't really have to teach ourselves when the market's opening back up again, because we're seeing it. We're waiting, biting our nails, waiting for it. But when the market's really, really good and you're enjoying that ride, when it turns, that's a little harder to catch because you're enjoying that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But like I was saying, having that adversity that you just hopefully coming to the end of is a good thing to have in your tool belt going forward, right?
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah,
absolutely. And even it doesn't even have to be a bad market. It's taught us how to be a little more cautious business wise, even in the good markets, and become a little more cash heavy at any time, no matter good or bad.
Yeah, So that's one of your takeaways. Keep a bigger cash flow going, a bigger cash
Yep.
reserve going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can count on your next profit, and it's easy to do in a market like we had 3 years ago. It's easy to count on a profit that you're going to have 2 months from now. But when that 2 months turns into 6 months because you didn't expect not to close in 2 months,
Yeah.
that's a game changer. So if you had that 4 months covered, then it's a little less of an issue than it was back then.
Right. You had mentioned the areas you deal in. You could one of the indicators you look at is the amount of properties, the amount of inventory that's available out there. You said you look at that closely. What other indicators do you look for besides how many are inventory wise? How many are on the market?
I think we have maybe a sneak peek, if you will, so we don't have to wait for media or news reports or things like that. We've been marketing in the business for so long now that we have a lot of our houses are bought off market. We don't buy a lot of our stuff on the MLS. We look to sell our properties on the MLS, but we buy a lot off market. So we've done direct mail marketing. We put a lot of postcards and letters out into the regions that we work in. Social media marketing, all the kind of advertising you see any business do. So our indicator is the conversations we have with the property owners that either call into us or we call out to them because of a form they filled out on our website. There's a lot of hesitancy on the phone calls for the past year. Maybe we'd be interested, but we're going to wait a little bit. But I'd say since Christmas, those conversations have changed since maybe even earlier, maybe even Thanksgiving. Those conversations are turning into, yes, we're interested. We want to sell in the next couple of weeks. We want to sell in the next couple of months. So those conversations are my indicator that the market's opening back up and people are actively looking and buying and selling again.
And what would you say is the major cause for that optimism?
One would have to be the change in administration. The confidence goes a long way. So even though the interest rates aren't where we want them to be, we're confident that they will be. And that took a lot of people out of the market, was not having any confidence whatsoever. And, we joke about like gas and eggs and things like that because that's fun. But, eggs were $9 a dozen here, a couple months ago.
Well, they killed 150 million of them. That'll cut chickens. That'll cut down your egg inventory.
Yeah.
So
I'd say we're in a good spot here because we're 2 miles from the Lancaster border in Pennsylvania. A lot of Amish, and they took full advantage of that. They have chickens and they put their eggs out for where they should be at $2 a carton. So it was a fight. Everybody's sitting out in front of the Amish farms fighting over eggs, and Walmart's stacked full of them because they're $9 a carton.
Yeah. Well, that's how you drive down inflation.
Well, it's true. Coming back down now.
I use the Entenmann's Freierhofer analogy when I try to explain that to people. It costs Entenmann's the same amount of money that it costs Freierhofer to get that box of donuts to the grocery store, especially with oil prices. Costs them the same amount of money, but they want to sell more than Freierhofer, and Freierhofer wants to sell more than Entenmann's. So that's when you start seeing pressure on the prices to go down, and that's really how you cure inflation. I've been saying for 30 years, and I'm only 22 years old, but I've been saying for 30 years, the tickling of the Fed rate doesn't cool or heat up inflation whatsoever. I've never seen it. I've never seen the practical use of using the Fed rate as a tool for that, to that end.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but at least in consumable goods, maybe I'm wrong in the real estate market. You know better than I do. But I've never seen the Fed rate affect inflation one way or the other.
This is why it's always such a hot topic, is energy and fuel are involved in everything that we do. So when you say like consumable or consumer purchases, You're either a necessity or a luxury, and luxuries go first. So when people start backing off on the luxuries, those businesses are still relying on energy and fuel for something, whether it be deliveries to their business or keeping their business open, depending on what their business is. Maybe they use it in the business. When those luxuries, those customers just stop coming. At first, they have to raise their prices to keep the bills paid, and then eventually either drive the prices back down again somehow because they have to negotiate then with their suppliers. Then it trickles down through the system, and then we can finally see on the necessity side the lowering in prices because they were forced to do it. One, they're either out of business or they had to negotiate with their suppliers because their suppliers aren't getting orders from them anymore.
Yeah, I always use that Entenmann's Freierhofer because it makes it in the most simplistic term, you know. It's really economics 101, you know. If you and I are selling the same product, I want to sell more than you do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Right,
it,
right.
and you know, how much it costs to fill the truck that delivers my product to that store is the same price that you're paying for the oil in your truck, the gas in your truck to deliver it to the store.
Yep.
So when oil comes down, that's the thing that affects inflation, you know, is the price of oil and gas. The easier task rather than trying to figure out what in your life is petroleum based, it's much easier to try and figure out what isn't petroleum based. Because just about everything is that you either wearing or using something that's petroleum based or petroleum was used to manufacture the thing, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that. Is it's fuel based because if a lot of these companies aren't needing services or deliveries anymore, then they're not using the fuel, so it's going to drive the price down there too. It's supply and demand all across the board.
Yeah.
But it starts there because it's used for damn near everything.
Yeah. Well, the price of oil still managed to take a bite out of my ass this winter, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
As we're talking, it's 2 days before the first day of spring, but it's been a colder than normal winter, in my view, at least for the New York area. And the price, so I had a couple of oil deliveries at the house and the store that were just under $4 a gallon, you know. And both places, the house and the store, have 550-gallon tanks. 2 tanks are $2.75 each. So when you're getting a 380-gallon delivery at $4 a gallon, that cuts into your coffee and cigarette money, right?
Oh, damn right it does.
So
It wasn't until and gas too. I mean, we were up in the high threes here for a while, and that's just recently softening now. I would say we're still in the threes, but I think I just passed one that was 316, which I mean I'm not excited about, but it's almost $1 better than we were last year.
yeah, it's going to take a while for production to come online to the point where it drives down the price of a gallon of gas, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I never understood why oil could be more than gas, given that gas is just refined oil, correct? Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it. Not all of it, but some of it has to do with taxes. We have built-in taxes in Pennsylvania, so we're consistently higher than most of the states that surround us.
Oh, really? Gas-wise?
Yeah, there's a built-in statewide tax to gas, so it could be free, and there's still going to be a mandatory tax.
Well, there's a built-in statewide price on gas in New York too. You know, I think the cheapest one in our tri-state area, at least, not counting Pennsylvania, is Jersey.
Yeah,
that's
usually for us, and then we take trips to Jersey every once in a while. It's only an hour or so to the border of Jersey, so even if we're on fumes, we speed there.
Yeah. How far away are you from your destination right now?
I just pulled in.
Oh, all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I don't want to keep you from your, you're looking at a potential purchase over there, right?
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate being on. I think this is probably the fourth time, if I'm remembering that correctly.
It could be fourth. You're gonna have a five too, because Shawnee Boy and yourself and me will go live. I got that Bill O'Reilly thing stuck in my head. We'll do it live.
Do it live.
We'll do it live. But I'll try and arrange something for the three of us. For the people listening to us. Christopher is my nephew, and so is Shawnee Boy. So I'm blessed with a good crew of family here. So we'll have you.
Sounds good to me.
We'll have you both on soon, and then we'll do it live.
Sounds good to me.
All right. And this time, and that time, it won't be whatever the hell time it is in the morning here. I'm only on my second cup of coffee, so. How I was able to follow along with what the hell you were saying is a miracle.
Well, it's recorded, so you can listen to it back.
Yeah, I'll just I'll produce it in fast forward, forward fast, whatever it is. All right, Chris. Well, you have a great day, and thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll see you. We'll see you when we do it live.